Hi guys, Scott and Phil here with a breakdown on exactly what we would be doing in 3 different case studies. So what we've done is we'll pull together 3 somewhat typical versions of clients that we like to work with, and we're going to walk through exactly what we would do in a similar scenario. So again, this is not what you should do. This is just what we would do in a scenario. If you think this applies to you, please do reach out and engage with us. We'd love to engage with you as a client. We wanted to give you a flavor of exactly what it would look like and just the type of scope of types of advice that we can provide. Phil, over to you.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Scott. So look, first scenario here, we've got Nick. Nick's a FIFO worker. So he's out in WA. He's fly in, fly out, a couple of weeks on, a couple of weeks off. Mid-40s, a bit over 200 grand in super, so not doing too bad for his age. He's got about 80 grand in debt, Land Cruiser, jet ski, all the usual stuff. He's got $500 a month surplus income. Not a lot because he's earning quite a bit, but obviously a lot of that's getting sucked up by the high interest debt. And he's also recently split with his partner, so they're working through a divorce settlement at the moment.
So this is an example of like what someone who is coming to us, what he's telling us. He goes, I've got $500 a month, I've got 80K of debt, I've got 230K super. So this is the information that he comes to us. So now this is an example of we go through a fact find with him, and then we really dig in, going, all right, what's the story? Let's see what you're really at.
Yeah, perfect. So look, we've dug into his cash flow a bit deeper, and as I find, it's quite common. People have probably underestimated their expenses a little bit. So we've run through a bit of a budget with Nick. We found out he actually didn't have $500 a month left over. He's actually only got $350. There's a bit more debt than we thought as well. He told us about the car loan, the jet ski loan, but he forgot to mention the credit card. So we're actually sitting at $87,000 high interest debt. So that's sucking up about 20% of his income. We've had a look at his super statement, about 230 grand, but it's invested quite conservatively. And he's only getting about 4% annual growth. And we also found that he's got, he's just got his default cover in super. So he's got a little bit of life cover, a little bit of disability cover, no income protection, and really quite inadequate in the other areas as well. And then we've also got the additional issue of, they're going through the settlement. Early indications are he may lose half of his super in the divorce settlement. So we need to start thinking about that as well.
Right. So, Phil, what are we going to do?
Yeah, look, great question. I think in my mind, the first thing we're probably looking at here, or the first couple of things we're probably looking at here, the immediate things that we need to hit that debt. It's senseless having high interest debt sucking up all your surplus income. So I think the first thing we'd be looking at doing is what consolidation options do we have here? Can we roll that all into something that is lower interest or something that's lowering the mandatory repayments across all the loans? And then I'll be looking at how best to deploy that cash flow. So possibly something like a debt snowball strategy, something like that we can really accelerate paying that debt off. If you want to know what that is, look up our other podcast that we did on the debt strategies. So that'd be the first stop, I think. Let's look at dealing with that debt, getting the interest as low as possible and getting that paid off as quick. So get a plan in place to get that knocked off. The next thing I'd be looking at is the insurance. There's obviously quite a gap there. It's just got a little bit of life disability. It's inadequate, not even enough there to cover the debt if something happens to him. But the biggest issue is no income. If he injures himself, he can't go to work, got no income coming in, that's going to be a problem. Look, income protection, disability insurance, that sort of gear, particularly for minors, depending on what you're doing, can be quite challenging. But that is an area we're quite good in. I deal with a lot of minors, so I know who to talk to and who not to. So we'd be getting into that a bit deeper, making sure the appropriate cover is in place. And if we can't get income protection because he's, underground throwing explosives down holes, then what other options have we got to make sure he's adequately protected? So we'd go through all of that. Future considerations then would be starting to think about, okay, once we do have this debt paid off, what are we going to do about the super? If he's lost half his super now at 40, what are we going to do to rebuild that to make sure that when he does get to retirement, he's got sufficient super? So that's going to be then looking at redeploying that surplus income, what's been saved from the debt repayments, that sort of stuff, potentially to some superannuation contributions. Obviously making sure he's getting best tax bang for buck within the contribution caps, and also looking at some little known rules out there that most people aren't aware of around what they call carry forward contributions. So what of his caps hasn't he used in the past we can take advantage of as well to keep reducing his tax, building that super back up. We're also going to be looking at the investment options.
Well, we actually changed the strategy depending on the time of year in relation to the 30th of June in relation to those tax strategies in relation to contributions.
Yeah,
I make mention because Phil has recently just done this for a client.
Yeah. look, there can be a bit extra bang for buck just being a bit more sensible in how you're balancing the contributions either side of financial years, that sort of gear. So absolutely, we'd be looking into all of that. But yeah, then the investment options. Like, why the hell are you getting 4% return on your super in your 40s? That's madness. You're barely going to keep ahead of inflation. So yes, your balance might not fluctuate a lot, but you're going backwards. Inflation's eating, increased cost of living is eating your returns. So we'll be getting him something more appropriate for his age and that he's going to be comfortable with. And then the other thing I'd be starting to think about is quite typical of a lot of the FIFO workers that I talk to. Some of them are operators and that's cool. They're sitting in an air-conditioned cabin. They're quite comfortable to keep working into their late 60s. Some are able to move to managerial or supervisory kind of roles. But like if you're a driller or you're working on a blast crew or something like that, and you don't have that potential to move to something else, it's probably unlikely you're going to be doing that in your 70s. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. There's definitely people out there doing it, but we need to be thinking about how early we can get you out of work as well. Because if you're not physically capable of doing that job that you're trained doing, and you're used to that level of income, we might even need to start thinking about some investing outside of super along the way so that you could potentially retire pre-60 and still have an income to live on until you can get to your super at the age of 60. So there'd be quite a bit there. Nick would be a great client to have. I think there'd be a lot we could do right now, but there'd be a lot we'd be doing ongoing over the next, 20 years into his retirement as well.
Yeah, and my normal bugbear is making sure that the joints are a bit light on the alcohol, making sure there's a bit of exercise, making sure that the knees are okay, the back is okay, making sure they can hang into those sorts of things, because that's a relevant thing, that your health. If you come to us and you've got chronic health issues, that is going to change how we put our plans together. So yeah, obviously you want to be as healthy as you possibly can for as long as you can.
100%. And we've got a plan for that decline in health or, not being able to do such a physical job later in life. If you do not start planning for that in your 40s, you are not going to have the options in your 50s. So really something that's critically important and I think often overlooked by people. When you turn up to work every day feeling pretty good in your 30s, you might not be feeling so good in your 60s. So just remember that and plan for it.
Right. Okay, so this is case study number 2, Alessandro. So Alessandro, she works in office admin. She works, we were trying to pick like in a regional town, so like Dubbo or not in a super high cost of living area. She's got 100,000 coming from an inheritance. She's got a partner who doesn't really want to engage us with advice. He's not quite sure. She's say 56, 57. She's in her late 50s and she's got 350K super. So that's what she's come to us. So we've had them. So that's sort of the introduction. That's where it's coming from. So now if we dig in, here's what actually the fact find looks like. So she was right. She did have 350K. It looks okay, but we've uncovered some health issues. So it's likely that she's not going to be continuing to work for more than 10 years. And if we do the numbers, it looks like she's going to be drawing upon her super pretty quickly and it'll be running out of money at the 15-year mark. She has an inheritance of about 100,000 coming from her mother in the future date. Her mother has passed away. It's going through probate at the moment, but her family has not finished the process. There's a level of gifting rules that need to be considered as well. If she wants to give that to some grandkids, she isn't quite sure where she should with that, but that's something that we have considered in our fact find. Again, her partner's very reluctant to speak to us. He's seen a lot of issues with online financial planners, but actually when we went through the fact find, it turned out he'd actually seen another financial planner and had lost money through that financial planner in the past. So when we got to the bottom of that, that really made sense. It turned out the person was an unlicensed advisor, and that was something that was really holding him back. It was a mental block that had happened 15 years ago. Unfortunately, that was just the reality of it. And there is a solution that we took him through for that. This condition that she has is also not only going to take up around 20,000 per year in medication, not on the PBS. She needs it, and she's going to have to draw upon her super balance to keep herself as healthy as she possibly can. And we've got a little mismatch in her retirement goals. So she's looking for 60,000 per annum income. Obviously, she's going to be falling short. She wants a comfortable retirement like all of us, but the reality is that we don't really have enough in super initially to really provide that for her. So this is a bit of a sticky client, also quite common. And here's what we would initially starting to do.
Yeah, maybe with it.
Straight away, we'd talk to her about the timing of this 100,000. So let's say, for example, Alessandro came to us, she signed an engagement agreement, and then she was happy to work with us. The first things that I'd be doing is I'd be talking to her, how are we going to structure this $100,000? I'd have a conversation with her about what do you want to do with your kids? What do you want to do with yourself? She came to us saying something like, I want to leave some money to my grandkids. They're so wonderful, et cetera, et cetera. I like to give the analogy of when you're on an airplane, they give the example of when the masks fall from the ceiling, you fit yourself before others.
Yep.
And in this case, unfortunately, due to our health, we really needed to put as much as money into her super so that she could continue without gifting that to others. And that was a tough conversation that she would have. And that's something that I would say to her, saying, look, the reality is you need to have as much money as you possibly can to keep your meds to be as healthy as possible. We can also talk to her about potentially boosting the age pension around the assets test. And that would be something that would be included in my advice around maximizing the age pension for her lifestyle and balance, super balance. And we'd be talking to what that would look like from a modeling perspective as she was drawing down the balance when she winds back her work and then stops working altogether.
There's just to pause on that point for a sec there too, Scott. I think sometimes that is, one of the most important parts of our job, or one of the biggest value adds, is sometimes potential clients will come to us with an idea of, I want to do this, and we could sit here and say, yes, you can do that thing and just tick a box and do it for them. Great. But really, if it's not the right thing, it's our job to tell you that's not the right decision for you, and actually present you with some better opportunities. So sometimes, you may come in and we may need to have a challenging conversation with you, but it's about us trying to find the right outcome for you and what you're trying to achieve. Sometimes that may not be the thing that you've come in and asked for. So.
Yeah, but you're going to get the honest, you're going to get, look, your true objective is to retire comfortably, and we are going to guide you to get there. And you should expect that from us. And it's not always an easy conversation, but we're going to guide it through. And I should also point out, Alessandra is a composite of a client group of people. She's not a real client. She's a composite. I've had this conversation a number of times. So it's not one specific person. We definitely have had that conversation before.
Yeah.
Okay, moving forwards. I would engage a partner. So he loves travel. His thing was travel, like going to Europe, and there would be a common goal for the two of them with her health declining. It was very important for the two of them to engage with each other. And that's how I would bring the partner on board. I don't love doing financial advice just for one person, because assets are joint. Everything that you own with your partner is theirs, and theirs is yours from every perspective, from a common law perspective, just a practical level. I don't love it when someone comes in saying, oh, no, just focus on me, please. We'll do it. But I don't know what you think, Phil, but in my view, I'd really prefer to talk to you and your partner together as a combined group. And it's about having a shared goal. Yeah,
it's challenging. And even if you are a couple that does treat your finances separately, Centrelink are going to treat you as a couple. They look at everything jointly. So for us to be able to provide that holistic advice, we really need a good understanding of what's going on in the household. We can then plan your spend individually, but we need to understand the whole picture.
Absolutely. And then for Alessandro, we're going to shift to a more defensive portfolio for her super, a GFC-like shock or a COVID-like shock to her portfolio. From an emotional perspective, would be not something that she would handle well, especially with a partner who'd had lost money in the past. So you're going to give up future income by doing that, by moving to a more defensive and conservative portfolio. But she's going to be able to sleep at night knowing there's not going to be a 40-50% drawdown in the event of a huge 40-50% stock market event in the next 2 to 3 years' time, or 10 years' time.
Actually, really, really key point that, Scott, because if you're currently, as most people are, sitting in a default fund, when you start getting in your 50s, you're going to be in one or two things. You're going to be in what's called a balanced fund, but actually isn't. It's probably more like a growth fund. So you're going to be in something quite aggressive. Or on the flip side, you're in a life stage fund, which has arbitrarily become more conservative as you've gotten older, and you probably haven't realized that. So in either of those scenarios, that's not going to be right for you at retirement. You're either got too much risk or not enough risk. You're never going to be in the perfect option. I'm a big proponent of more like a goals based. Let's actually, what do you want to do? And let's plan the investments accordingly to you personally and your goals. You get a much better outcome than just sitting in that default, either too risky or not risky enough option.
Yeah. And there's also tax inefficiencies within the funds too. All right. This is our third and final case study.
All right. So we've got Felicity and Omar, late 30s. They've got 3 kids. They're lucky buggers. They've got about $5,000 a month surplus income. And they came to us just looking at setting up a self-managed super fund. They wanted to try and build their super for their future retirement.
I think in this case, one of them had been on the internet, been doing some podcasts, and they'd seen some property stuff. They'd gone deeper, done more and more research, and they were keen as mustard. They came to us with everything ready to go. They'd had ChatGPT look into it, and they were like, right, this is what we want. Again, this is a composite. This is not an actual client, but this has definitely happened to us. Phil, over to you.
Yeah, perfect. So we jumped into a fact find. Look, young professionals earning pretty good money. Not a real good idea of where their spending was going, though. They were living a good life and they were aware of it. So actually, the surplus was only sitting around $4,500 a month, and a lot of that was getting spent. A good 60% of that surplus was getting spent on just discretionary stuff, going out for dinner and whatever else. They're obsessed with the idea of an SMSF after, a bit of internet research and whatnot. And the main, when we dug into it, the main concern was, look, we've just heard you can have more control. You can invest in more stuff with an SMSF. Fair enough. Long-term vision was a bit fuzzy. Like they had a very loose goal, build their super for their future. But trying to understand actually what does that mean? What do you want your future to look like? And getting into their comfort levels with investing, we found that they're sort of mismatched. So, one of them was quite aggressive, one of them was quite conservative. We needed to work together to figure that out.
Super common,
yeah, really common. And then just risks around the family. So again, just holding the default cover in their insurance, hadn't really looked at it. They got young kids, they got a mortgage. There's a lot going on there that could go wrong, and they really were inadequately insured. So we needed to take a look at that for them as well. We ran through a needs analysis, so understanding what do we need to be protected, what do they want to provide for the kids, how much debt needs to be cleared, all that sort of stuff. And we found out they had about $1 million protection need that was a shortfall. So pretty significant gap.
Great. So they've engaged us, they've signed an agreement. They say, well, right, what do we do?
Well, the first thing was when we dug into the SMSF thing a bit, gave them an idea of sort of the costs involved and the administrative burden in running it and that sort of gear. Actually, given that their whole concept was just they wanted more control over how their money was invested, their understanding was, we've got these industry funds now, we've got 5 options, that's all we can do. So I actually just went through an education piece. Actually, there are other ways we can invest your super without a self-managed super fund that can give you access to hundreds and hundreds of options that we can structure and tailor. They liked the idea of borrowing to invest, which is one of the things that had them thinking about property, something they'd heard on a podcast somewhere. And we talked about options around geared funds. So, ways to borrow money to invest in shares and that sort of thing, but without the costs and the administrative burden of the self-managed super fund. So happy to go down that sort of path. We went through a risk profile and a really in-depth discussion and worked to sort of align their thoughts around that a bit, given that they are really young. The more conservative stance of one spouse is really more from just a lack of understanding and education than anything else. So we went through a good in-depth education piece. Scott?
Yeah, it brings it up. I think quite often my favorite one is when people say to me, I'm a conservative investor. And they go, oh, okay. What does that mean to you? And they go, well, I'm a conservative investor. I've got 2 investment properties that are completely geared, and I've also got my own house. The net equity across the 2 properties is very minimal, but you're conservative. And I think it's just actually that's a super high growth strategy because you're borrowing to invest, you're using the bank's money, and you've got a very, very illiquid asset, e.g. a house that's hard to sell, and all of your eggs are in 2 baskets, 2 properties right there, which is even more high growth.
Incredibly, much riskier strategy than a diversified portfolio in super for sure.
So when someone says to me, "Oh, I'm conservative on what," it's take yourself through the process with us, and then it's actually understanding around. Oh, okay, well, this headline, I'm a balanced investor, I'm a growth investor, high growth investor, is actually just sort of industry terms. You got to figure out what's right for you, and that's something that we will tell you based on our experience and our conversations with you. I wanted to keep us to 20 minutes and we've gone over. Phil, what are we going to do?
Yeah, a couple of quick bits. So obviously, everyone should have an emergency account. You need, good 6-month buffer put aside, especially if you've got young kids' debt. So building that emergency fund to be your first step with the surplus income. Went through the needs analysis. We worked out the insurance. We've recommended a portfolio to cover them for everything they need there. We've split that between super and non-super, tax optimized, given them a good setup there.
Nice.
And then we can look at some contributions to super to reduce tax. And another really important thing that came out through the needs analysis, they want the kids to go to private school, really high education expenses expected. So we've put in place some really tax-effective education investments specifically for the kids to make sure that when they roll around and hit high school and the $25,000 private school bill drops in, they're not scrambling. It's provided for in a tax-effective way because they're on high incomes. Happy days. There we go. There's your short, concise summary.
Right. So if you've got questions, if you want us to do exactly this for you, please get in touch. This is a flavor on how we operate and the types of strategies we do. It's not a simple one size fits all. You are different. Everyone's different. Expect a customized portfolio to your retirement goals.
100%. Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Have a great day.